You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone, we're going over the top games of the week, the high-profile, the high-volume games. Games that you're probably watching, you want to have a little action on. Let's get right to it. Start off with Kansas State and Arizona. Now, this is the second of two Big 12 games that will not count the standings. Baylor and Utah this past Saturday did not. This is not. They didn't want to interrupt the contracts, wanted to finish them out, but it doesn't count in the standings. I don't know if it changes my handicapping in any way. Both of these teams were down in the second half. Both are 2-0. Both are ranked, but both were down in the second half. And Kansas State, pretty doggone fortunate to get out of Yeoman Stadium in uptown New Orleans with a win. Tulane is good this just in. Kansas State is 7:58 at home at the Little Apple. And, man, things happen at the Little Apple. That is a tough place to play. Not sure if Arizona's even ever made it to play at Manhattan, Kansas. Of course, the new conference affiliations. A lot of this going on in college football. So, but Arizona averages 11 yards a play. That is number one in all of college football. But it was all kinds of yards per play in the opener against New Mexico, and then 22-10. And what did Northern Arizona do? Well, they doubled T. McMillan, the wide receiver, is going to be a first-round pick. You know, his high school star, him and the quarterback, stayed at Arizona, gives them a really nice game. How about this? Arizona's got the longest winning streak in the country right now at 9 straight. They won the last 6 regular season games, beat Oklahoma in a bowl game, and now with Michigan's loss on Saturday to Texas, they have the longest current winning streak. But McMillan, in the opener, 10 catches for 304 yards for 4 TDs, only 2 for 11 against Northern Arizona. The new head coach, Brennan, comes over from San Jose State, where he did a hell of a job there. It's a nice hire in Tucson. He said they bracketed him, they doubled him, and they took him away. I think that maybe the blueprint has been laid down here. Look, McMillan is going to be he's a big-time star. But, man, they could – even back in the days with Megatron, with the Detroit Lions, man, they could take him away if they wanted to. So maybe the blueprint by the in-state little brother has been laid for opposing teams. I think Kansas State is going to get their mojo going again. That was more Tulane being that tough and playing tough at home as opposed to them just kind of sleepwalking there through a game at Yeoman. I like Kansas State in this one, minus the 7 at home against Arizona, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Kansas State this past weekend, extremely fortunate, to put it mildly, to escape New Orleans with a 34-27 victory over Tulane. The potential game-tying touchdown pass with 17 seconds left by Tulane nullified due to a questionable offensive pass interference call against Tulane. You know, meanwhile, I believe Arizona, they have some troubles on defense. They lost all of their top defensive tackles, a number of them through the portal. They're still really strong offensively, but I think solid offensive teams are going to be able to expose them. In their opener, they gave up 39 points to New Mexico. New Mexico's quarterback, Devin Dampier, rushed for 130 yards in that game. Kansas State quarterback, Avery Johnson, he doesn't run it as much as Dampier, but he can definitely run it when he chooses to. So that's something to keep in mind here. I think Johnson might, carry it 8 or 9 times against Arizona. I made Kansas State a -8 favorite here, so I think the number's spot on. So I won't be involved, but certainly be rooting for you and the Wildcats in that one, Jimmy.
All right, let's look at the backyard brawl, and this will be at Pitt, downtown Pittsburgh. And West Virginia comes in a road favorite here, 2.5 and 60.5. How about the Pittsburgh Panthers down 27-6 in the second half to Cincinnati? They scored 22 unanswered, and that was 3 touchdowns and a field goal, so 4 scores to get it. And the star of the game is former Texas A&M commitment. He flipped. Alabama signee, redshirted, transferred. Kid right here from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Eli Holstein. So Holstein is throwing for $319 a game. Pitt Panthers are averaging, in their 2 games, 534 yards a game. Narduzzi said they were going to be a little bit more up-tempo and throw it around a little bit. Guy he has a talent. He's averaging 8.5 yards an attempt. West Virginia going on the road here. I think there'll be a lot of points scored, so a lean toward the over. But what I like more is home dog rivalry. And all of a sudden, Pitt was in their fans were a little bit uneasy. They go on the road to beat Cincinnati, who was in the playoff not too long ago. And all of a sudden, a little juice in the stadium, being 2-0, and now hosting their rival that comes in from about an hour drive away. I'm on the Panthers here, plus 2.5 at home in a rivalry game. And I like the way the redshirt freshman quarterback from Baton Rouge, Holstein, looks so far.
Yeah, I tell you, Pat Narduzzi, he's a football coach, and you can't count him out. And what he did before this season was he hired former Western Carolina offensive coordinator Cade Bell, who likes to play the up-tempo. Cade Bell was the offensive coordinator at Western Carolina, an FCS school, for his father, head coach Kerwin Bell, who I know you recognize and many of the listeners recognize as well as the former University of Florida quarterback. So he's the guy in charge of that offense now. And like you mentioned, Eli Holstein done a good job of leading the new offense. But this is certainly Pitt's toughest opponent to date. They started out with Kent State and then the come-from-behind victory last week against Cincinnati that you mentioned. And against Cincinnati last week, they trailed 27-6 late in the third quarter. Holstein leads them on 3 consecutive touchdown drives, where he throws touchdown passes on each of those drives. They had a couple, I think, of failed 2-point conversions.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
On those 3 touchdown drives, so they needed the field goal to actually eke out the 28-27 victory. You look at West Virginia, they were unimpressive and looked out of their element, especially in the second half of their season opening loss at home to Penn State, 34-12. But the Nittany Lions, they're going to do that to a lot of opponents. So I don't, it certainly wasn't a favorable showing by West Virginia. But I'm going to be on the sideline on this one. And the main reason, just the fact that West Virginia's played somebody, Pitt really hasn't. So this will be an interesting one to watch. But certainly the backyard brawl, the home field advantage will play a role. So I certainly can't fault you backing those Pitt Panthers here against West Virginia.
Yeah, should be a lot of points. Yeah, Kerwin Bell was the quarterback for the Florida Gators when they were just a minute away from beating number 1 Georgia. But Georgia, the Lindsey run game in Jacksonville from about 85, 90 yards out to keep their national championship drive alive in 1980. All right. Well, we got a little attention on Coach Prime. Don't know how good they are. They had a scare against North Dakota State in their first one. Failed to cover as a favorite. Then they were catching points on the road in a revenge spot for Nebraska. Nebraska leaned on them pretty good and kind of took their foot off the pedal in the second half and cruised to an easy victory. So Coach Prime 0-2 against the spread this year. So a lot of games last year they were underdog and they did pretty good as an underdog last year. But Coach Prime in a year plus in Boulder is 1-4 as the chalk. They're the chalk again. You remember this one last year. It went overtime. It was early in the season, produced all kinds of ratings. And, gave Coach Prime in Colorado a lot of clout. But now they go on the road. And the Rocky Mountain Showdown is back on campus in Fort Collins for the first time since 1996. Well, at this new stadium, Canvas Stadium, that opened up 2017. You may remember that was a Week 0 win against Oregon State for Mike Bobo and the Colorado State Rams. Well, this will be the first time that Colorado comes to this stadium. So a little extra juice for the Rams here. Rams, it's just simple as that. Little revenge spot, hated rival, and they got them at home. So points at home in a rivalry. It's funny that we got these rivalries going on this week in Pitt, West Virginia, Colorado State. Help me out. There's another one out there that's pretty good. Oregon State, and Washington State. I shouldn't forget those before they get into their new conferences in conference play. But still, 7.5, 58.5, and there's a lot of danger signs. And, some people just didn't care for Deion Sanders' style as a player. Well, with the confrontation with him and McCarver, the jewelry, the rap videos, the whole whatever, but he can play. Well, now it's starting to see some of the danger signs as a coach. And what you never want to put individuals ahead of a team as a coach when you run a team. You will lose your locker room. I don't care who's making what and who's not. And it seems like, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are clearly put ahead of everyone. The latest, Deion wants, Shedeur's rap song instead of the fight song after he throws a touchdown. That's real team-oriented. So this thing is, and the bottom line, though, forget all of that, which I don't care for, and I think that may take further time to really take its effect. But what I know right now, they still don't have any linemen. And, and that's on both sides. You can't run, and you can't stop the run, and you can't practice against stopping the run. You're going to have problems. So this is going to limit. Colorado's exciting. He brings a lot of sizzle. There's no doubt. He brings viewers. He's funny. He's got a way. But, the grandstanding and the policies, we're not talking to this media outlet. We're not doing this. We're changing the fight song. That's going to take time. But they can't block. They can't block. And Shedeur, you would think, if you want to be individual, protect your son, coach. They don't. He's running for his life. I'm taking those points at home. Colorado State, rivalry game, points at home. Yes, indeed, Paul.
Yeah, just as a side note, this time last year, 365 days ago, I believe, Colorado was 2-0. They were not only the toast of college football, the talk of college football, but they were a national news story. On 60 Minutes, the world was at Deion's disposal there. But, man, what a difference a year makes. I think some of the turmoil, some of the things going on off the field, it's okay. You can get by with that stuff when you're winning. But when you start losing, I think things really go off the rails. And I could see Colorado's season ultimately just really ending up in the dumpster. I think it's teetering on thin ice right now. You mentioned first time the Rocky Mountain Showdown has been played in Fort Collins since 1996. So there's a lot of excitement in Fort Collins for this game. Last year, one of college football's better games, not only in the month of September, but really the whole season. Colorado State leads throughout. Colorado rallies late to force overtime, ultimately wins the game in double overtime, 42-34. In last year's game, Colorado State really moved the ball on Colorado, 454 total yards, 396 of those yards through the air. And Colorado State's standout receiver, Torrey Horton, came up big, 16 catches, 133 yards, and 1 touchdown. Horton, though, nursing a groin injury. They feel like he'll play. Jay Norvell said yesterday at his press conference that he thinks he'll play, but those things can be nagging, and he's a big part of their offense. And to this point, though, his production is a little bit down, only 8 catches in the first 2 games of the season for the Rams, and maybe that groin has something to do with that. Not only is he ailing, but Colorado State's top defensive end, Newer Gatkuth, he's going to miss the game. He had 6.5 tackles for loss last year. But on the other side, Colorado has some injury issues as well. Shiloh Sanders, their top guy in the back of the defense, a defense that needs all the help it can get. He's out for the season, so that's problematic for the Buffaloes there. The Buffaloes, as we've mentioned, they've got on-the-field issues. They've got off-the-field issues. Shedeur Sanders in a press conference seemed to be, kind of putting his offensive lineman under the bus. After the loss to Nebraska, talking about how many times did they touch Raiola, kind of insinuating he's back here running for his life. And I know it's got to be frustrating, but you can't say those things out in public. Those things need to be internal. So, with all the different factors, I'm with you here. I just think Colorado State plus 7.5 at home. Colorado having a lot of issues. I like the Rams plus 7.5 as well for a small play over Colorado.
That'll make me want to bust my ass for you, huh? Publicly criticize me. Yeah, there we go. That's a little counterproductive there. All right, Alabama in Wisconsin. The Big Game, Fox's Big Game pregame show will be on campus at Madison. And, since Nick Saban took over 2007, 2008, he started scheduling those openers, those neutral site openers, Clemson, USC, Virginia Tech, Michigan, even Wisconsin. back in the day on neutral sites, but never on a visiting campus, non-conference, rarely. Now, they've been to, some other campuses, like South Florida, of all people, but still, here they are going to Madison to play. Tyler Van Dyke, the Miami transfer for the Wisconsin Badgers, he is averaging right around 200 yards a game in his 2 starts there. They scored 28 and 27 points total against Western Michigan and South Dakota. Alabama will provide a much different challenge. After a smooth win in the opener for Kalen DeBoer, they're now 14-13 in the fourth quarter at Nick Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That's been renamed, if you even know that. But then they stretched it out in the fourth quarter and made it more comfortable win. Right now at Bet Rivers, Alabama is 15.5 and 50.5 on the road at Wisconsin, Paul.
Yeah, 15.5 points. First of all, I want to acknowledge, and you touched on it, Wisconsin hasn't exactly moved the needle offensively in its first 2 games of the year. A pair of modest 2-touchdown victories over Western Michigan and FCS South Dakota. Like you mentioned, I think that Western Michigan score was 28-14, 28 points by Wisconsin. We saw what Ohio State did to Western Michigan this past weekend. For comparison's sake, the Badgers offense clearly searching for its identity. Their new quarterback, as you mentioned, Tyler Van Dyke, the Miami, Florida transfer, he's passed for a total of only 406 yards. So as you mentioned, just a little bit over 200 yards a game, averaging just 6.4 yards per attempt against, mediocre competition, to put it mildly. Their top running back, Ches Maluzzi, averaging under 4 yards a carry in the first 2 games. So they've got some offensive concerns right now. But Alabama and his highly acclaimed first-year head coach, Kalen DeBoer, going for the on the road, rather, for the first time all year. They would appear to have the Badgers totally outclassed. But this is college football, and sometimes a talent edge can be neutralized by the home field, especially when we're getting 2 touchdowns and change. So I just find that too appetizing to pass up here. Camp Randall, as you mentioned, the Fox show is going to be there on campus. Camp Randall's going to be rocking on Saturday. Again, Alabama, its first road game of the season. Funny things can happen on the road. And then you've got the aforementioned Maluzzi, who, while he's averaging less than 4 yards per carry, he's a guy who's a home run hitter, and he's been a home run hitter during his collegiate career, capable of going the distance on any given play. Plus, this is only the 4th time since the year 2009 that Wisconsin has been a home underdog. The other 3 times, all against Ohio State, and they covered each of the other 3 times. And that included a cover last year against the Buckeyes as a 14.5-point home underdog. Lost to Ohio State 24-10. Just got in under the number, but got the money nonetheless. Again, 15.5. That's a lot of points, and Wisconsin still plays a little bit of defense. Alabama on the road. I'll take the Badgers plus 2 touchdowns and change over the Crimson Tide.
All right, don't knock things around the house now when you jumping around at the end of the third quarter when they're getting excited at Camp Randall now, Paul. Mamas don't get excited. You'll be upset if you're knocking around the furniture. Oh, yes, indeed. That's going to be a great setting. That's going to be a great setting for college football game. Hope it is competitive. Let's look at our last game in the ESPN Game Day pre-game show. We'll be going to Columbia, South Carolina. A little bit of a head-scratcher here, but the Gamecocks go into Lexington and whoop up on Kentucky 31-6. Maybe Big Blue Nation, maybe they're not too excited that Stoops didn't take that A&M job. So, well, he's there, but, man, Kentucky looked bad. They've always... This is not the first time they've had their struggles offensively, under Stoops. I get it, especially on the offensive line. There's some decent quarterbacks that have looked not so decent because of their lack of protection. But to get beat down the way they were, it was just really, really ugly. Beamer is fighting for his life. A lot of people didn't give him a chance because they get out of that cozy East. Schedule's a little bit tougher with Oklahoma and Texas coming in, and the roster in that schedule, a lot of people didn't know if he was going to make it. This line opened up 10 some places and got knocked down immediately to 8. Now it's down to 7.5 and 50.5. 7.5 and 50.5 over South Carolina. LSU, it wasn't just USC, but it was also Nicholls State. Now, Nicholls State, the FCS team, was loading the box. I get it, but you don't get outgained by over 100 yards against Nicholls State. So running the ball and stopping the run is a bit of an issue for Brian Kelly 2 games in. Nussmeier looks good, but again, when you can't run the ball and you can't stop the run, that's certainly going to limit you on what you can accomplish. Tigers 7.5 on the road here against South Carolina. All of a sudden, they're 2-0 and excited at Columbia.
Yeah, ESPN, their college game day show, as you mentioned, coming to Columbia for the first time since 2014. The Gamecocks, for people who are not aware, and this is my opinion, it's subjective, but I think they've got one of the more underrated fan bases in all of college football. They're very rabid about their college football team, maybe don't have the historical success of some other programs, which makes it, in my mind, even more impressive because they love those Gamecocks. This is LSU's first trip to Columbia since 2008. LSU's dominated this series recently. They have 7 straight victories over South Carolina. Looking at this season, though, South Carolina 2-0. They opened with victories over Old Dominion of the Sun Belt Conference, and then, as you mentioned, over Kentucky this past weekend. But the offense, they're struggling. The Gamecocks only had a total of 540 yards offense in those 2 victories over Old Dominion and Kentucky, only averaging 4.2 yards per play. The passing game is clearly limited. Their new starting quarterback, Lenora Sellers, more of an athlete, probably more of a runner than a pure quarterback. So he's still trying to find his footing in the running game, in the passing game rather. This play on my part, I do like South Carolina as the home underdog, getting more than a touchdown. This is more of a play against LSU, probably the road favorite, than a play on South Carolina. LSU clearly lacks a running game. And, when you lose playmakers like their quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman Trophy last year, those 2 receivers, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., those are 3 players who were selected in the top 23 selections of the entire NFL draft this past April. So all first-round selections, all taken in the first 23. So that's a lot of big-time frontline talent out the door. And I think we talked about it a little bit off air, but Tropical Storm Francine expected to hit the Gulf Coast midweek, maybe there on the Louisiana coast where you guys are stationed. So stay safe. But right now, and things can change dramatically, but there's a chance of rain Saturday in Columbia in the aftermath of that storm, 70% chance of rain. And weather can be the great neutralizer as well, can keep scoring down. So when a team's getting more than a touchdown, I certainly put a check mark on that side of the ledger for that particular team. So just add it all together. I like the Gamecocks rather heavily juiced plus 7.5 over LSU.
And the running game got that much tougher because the third running back in the USC game, John Emery, former 5-star who originally committed to Georgia, flipped to LSU, fought some injuries over the course of his season. He was the most effective back. It was like, okay, this is a nice story. The first day back in Baton Rouge in practice, he tears his ACL in practice. So further, damaging that running game. So he was a guy that they were going to lean on pretty heavily. So running the ball and stopping the run. One little caveat, the Gamecocks fans, it's noon kickoff, a little early, so just limits how much juice they can throw back before they get there. But that pregame show will take them right into kickoff and in South Carolina. And there's no doubt. You remember the long-haired quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, huh? That was the first bowl game they ever won, ever in their history. And that wasn't that long ago. So, no, their support per their history is near the top of the country. There's no doubt about it. Should be a fun atmosphere in Columbia, South Carolina. So we do this twice a week. We look at the high-profile game, the high-volume games that we just did, and then we'll do our best bets a little bit later in the week. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott, Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.